Welcome to the Paranormal Pendle podcast, coming to you from the heart of Pendle Witch Country in the northwest of England. My name is Craig Bryant, author, investigator and collector of stories. Join me as we take a journey into the paranormal, UFO sightings, cryptozoology and big cats. This is the Paranormal Pendle podcast. Welcome to episode 19 of the Paranormal Pendle podcast, broadcasting to the Paranormal UK radio network at paukradio.com. My guest on this edition, and I'm delighted to welcome him, is investigator, UFO investigator and author, Phillip Kinsella. So, Phillip, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Craig, for having me on your show. It's an honour. Thank you.
No, it's the honour's all mine. Can I just? You sent me your CV, which is hugely impressive, I have to say. And I just wanted to pick a few things out before we sort of go into the nitty gritty of the chat. You're both a clairvoyant medium and a UFO investigator and author. Having had many bizarre UFO paranormal experiences through your life, along with your identical twin brother Ronald, you have researched the phenomena on a serious level, and especially after an alien abduction in 1989, and you've written several books on the subject. So could we sort of, the first thing that I would normally ask is what got you interested in UFOs in the first place, but I assume that the incident that happened in 1989 was really the starting point for you. Would I be right in assuming that?
Yes, Craig, it was. And the reason for that is that during that period, during that time, I won't go into the abduction itself because it's quite long-winded, but it displayed to me another area or another part to a puzzle I've been working on for many years about what we call the abduction phenomena with so-called aliens, because we don't really know what we're dealing with. And I always was led to believe that the abduction happened on a very physical level of integration. What I find most, really puzzling is the fact that the experience that happened to me, there was one part where, there was physical interaction, i.e. seeing a small 3-foot grey type being all clad in black that entered through to our house in a village one night when me and my brother and my sister and our dog, yes, the dog was present there. It came through the glass doors, literally physically through the glass doors. And then in the early hours of the morning, I found myself being taken through on my back, solid matter, and up to a craft. And, I recalled all of the fine details of the abduction, which is quite strange because most people tend to have problems with that. But this led me into the area of what did I have an alien abduction? Is this what happened to me? And I started really trying to put the pieces together. And I found that even in the classic Betty and Barney Hill UFO incident, back in the very early 1960s, they had a physical experience with what they thought and knew to be a UFO. And then their abduction seems to have come in kind of like a dream state episodes where they couldn't recall everything. So this is what led me into the area. I wanted to find out whether or not I was, I've got to say this, delusional, and I don't think that I am, or that, that this happened in a dream state, which was impossible because I was left with physical marks after the experience. Okay. And this is what led me into the area. So I'm one of these people who, I know that about anyone can claim anything, but, I have my feet firmly planted on the ground. I don't mess around with nonsense. And this is what led me into over 30 years of still exploring this phenomena. And we still don't have any answers, but I've kind of like put a few bits to the puzzle together, as it were. I hope that I have.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking how old you were when this happened, Phillip?
Yes, I was 20 years of age.
Okay. And you obviously can recall quite vividly what happened. I mean, what sort of path of research did it take you down then after the incident?
Well, I started to reach out to ufologists in those days. It was all through letter because, the internet was not really around.
No.
And I didn't, belong to any UFO groups until much later. But the penny dropped for me in 1996. Now, the abduction happened in 1989, and there were greys that were involved, or at least two of them. And there were also something termed reptilians, which I have suffered, unfortunately, within the media, because, even to the point where one of my earlier books that was published by a publishing company, Kapelbaum Publishing, John Day, the editor, when I recounted the episode that occurred to me, and when I made mention of the intrusive medical procedure that had been administered, rather embarrassingly, and then seeing three reptilians, he retracted that part from the book. Okay. That was the agreement, because he felt that, how on earth would reptilians connect with grey aliens and UFOs? And of course, it's only recently that, I was, even myself couldn't believe it and didn't want to believe it, although it happened. We do seem to find that they do have some connection within this field of investigations. And when we're dealing with the paranormal, it opens up to all levels of high strangeness. And the penny dropped for me back in 1996, where I was pondering over this episode of what occurred to me in 1989, the village of Master Mortain, one winter's night. And all of a sudden I had this, it was almost as if my head opened and I was given this theory, or saying given it. I don't recall anyone, saying, here you are, Philip, here's the theory. It just seemed to open in my mind. And it was about the greys and of cloning and of the hybridization. Not that I saw any hybridization when I was taken. But it kind of like, then I put everything down in an article and submitted it to Alien Encounters. I'm sure you remember the magazine all the way back then. And they published it as an article called Spirits in the Material World, and considered it revolutionary within its speculation. But it didn't end for me then. I wanted more and more. I wanted to find out what we were dealing with.
Okay. So what are your theories then with regards to the reptilians? Because it's not a subject that I'm really familiar with, I'll be honest with you.
And neither am I. It's not with me either. And it's still a puzzle. I mean, I bought a load of literature on reptilians, trying to find out where they figure within this. You get some people saying that they are the ones that control the greys. I'm not so sure myself personally. The greys are the main area that I've been really researching and looking into. Okay. The reptilians are a bit of a mystery because, anyone, as I said before, can claim anything. But I wanted the truth. I wanted to find the truth of what was going on, but I can't discount what happened. There were three of them on board that craft, if it was a craft, because the way that these entities can interact with us is phenomenal on a mental level or a psychic level, as it were. But to me, it was a craft, and so but the theory centered more around the greys, and you hear these stories about hybridization. I met Dr. David Jacobs in Arizona some years ago now at a conference out there, and he has different ideas from me. He believes that that these aliens are creating hybrids to walk among us. I respect the good doctor's theories, but my theory went into more of the fact of when we're dealing with abductions, we're dealing with entities who themselves can't reproduce. They seem devoid of the very attributes that make us what we are in terms of our personality, our individuality, what makes us what we are as human sentient beings. And I know there's the argument, people say, well, the greys are clones, or they're biomechanical machines or whatever. But I think there's a lot more to this within the UFO field of investigations, that we have to walk in very uncomfortable territory indeed in order to establish exactly what's going on. So the main thesis in the area that I've been involved in, not just with UFO studies, i.e. or UAPs as they call them now, they've changed the acronym to make it more scientific, which I think is a load of rubbish. But more about what we are dealing with and why this force, this intelligence, seems to hide. It's like chasing shadows. We never have really any physical proof other than scars and, in some instances, implants that are left. It is real, but I've been looking into, what they could possibly represent and why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So this then opened up a whole can of worms for me about life after death, soul, consciousness, continuation, because when you've had an experience, I always joke and say, thank God I'm not yet in a psychiatric ward, and people will criticize you, but I have a wicked sense of humor, Craig, because sometimes this kind of thing can lead you into areas that are like, oh my God, this is going to give me a headache.
Yeah.
But it is important that, we're trying to fit it or squeeze it all into one box, and it won't fit. So we have to broaden our horizons on the theoretical front in terms of, what are we dealing with? What are the greys? What are UFOs? I can't talk for all of the UFOs because, we understand that there are other life forms in this physical universe.
Yeah.
But we have to take into consideration other elements with regards to hyperdimensions of reality, other states of awareness that's beyond our reach, our current physical reach.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So you research into the greys then. What's your feeling about where they're from, ultimately what they want? You mentioned about cloning. Do you think
yes,
they are a sort of almost a hive as such, not meaning to put too much of a comparison with a certain well-known sci-fi TV program, but they I mean, are we looking at something along the lines of the Borg, for instance, or are we looking at creatures that are being manipulated, perhaps by the reptilians, perhaps by something else? I mean, what's your feeling at the moment, at your current position of research?
Well, without giving too much away, I believe that we're dealing with some kind of hyperdimensional being. When we look at the universe, we're still trying to work out, people arguing about the Big Bang theory. Are we contained in something, or is it going on to this process of expansion, and then eventually it will collapse in upon itself? But, when we look at the research of the greys come across as very old, but it could be possible that they are from another universe entirely, and that perhaps their evolution has not afforded them the ability to reproduce as we do, i.e., if they've cloned themselves, literally continuously clone themselves, that they have cancelled themselves out of creation, for want of a better word. I mean, my understanding in terms of the human attributes of what we are is that we reproduce. And I believe that, the soul comes in through the biological matter from its state of awareness of what people call the other side, with inherent memory. And as it comes into this existence, probably creating memories on a blank canvas. And when we die, that we return back, carrying more information back, perhaps to the Godhead, to expand upon that process of creation. Now, if we cloned ourselves, physically cloned ourselves, so that when you have a clone, that copy is outside the loop of where the soul would originally come into. It would have only the memory of one single incarnation. And when it dies, it may not be able to return back to source, as we call it, and yet gravitate to another area.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that these beings are of one mind, of one hive, and that they are interested in human reproduction, which is very suspect.
It is. It would seem to suggest then that either they can't reproduce, or they're interested in how we reproduce, either from a scientific angle or from something that's coming from a more nefarious angle. Perhaps they are trying to create themselves in order to be able to reproduce themselves, because they can't at the moment. very, very interesting subject.
Yes, and when you look, sorry to interrupt. When I looked as I did into the near-death experience and the abduction phenomena, I really looked into this. And when you think about the abduction phenomena, in a lot of cases, you'll find that the individual is taken through solid matter. And is it possible that these greys, within their state of reality, within their dimension of awareness, are able to literally pull your real self away from the physical, biological housing and bring the real essence of you into their matrix so that the physical interaction occurs? Now, in a near-death experience, when someone dies and they pass over, the encounter is more real. The world is more real than the one they left behind, because in more cases than not, when they've passed over and they've met, loved ones or masters or guides or whatever, they are literally transformed by the experience. And in most cases, that consciousness or the soul of that individual, if it was diseased before it went into the light or passed over, in a lot of cases, their whole biological system has been corrected on their return. So I thought, well, if people can pass over into another world through near-death experience, then what's stopping some other entities doing it on another level of integration? It's something we have to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really interesting. Can we move on to talking about some of the books that you've written?
Oh yes,
Is that okay? Because one of them that I noticed on your CV you sent to me was about the Rendlesham UFO mystery, the famous Rendlesham Forest. Your book was called Sky Crash. That's correct. Time. Yeah. So, what's your feeling then about the Rendlesham mystery as a whole?
Well, I think life itself is a mystery. I think sometimes you end up being in places that you thought you'd never dream of being in. And to be honest with you, that was an amazing occurrence. And, I understand that there's a lot of debate with regards to Rendlesham. Certain key people have not been telling the truth. But, I met Colonel Charles Holt, and he's a gentleman. His mind is as sharp as a knife. And Jim Penniston, an amazing guy. There's no doubting what he saw with John Burroughs or Colonel Charles Holt. That is absolutely as they state it happened. Now, I got involved with that through another researcher, a good friend, and I will say here, Peter Robbins, who at that time, all those years ago, told me, my brother, and a good friend, Susan, to go into the forest, to go and see it, because it's really weird. Yeah. And that's exactly what we did. And that's where I ended up meeting Brenda Butler. Now, Brenda Butler was the first investigator with Dot Street and Jenny Randalls to research and publish a book called Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy by Neville Spearman that came out in 1984. And I got out the car and I met this lady and I said to her, I'm looking for Brenda, but I'm hoping she was here. And she said, this is me. So we then teamed up and then decided to write this book. And by the way, Philip Mantle, British ufologist and a brilliant man, our mentor, is re-releasing the book Sky Crash Throughout Time that I co-wrote with Brenda, that Kapelbrand brought out in 2013, I believe. And that's coming out this year. So that the book is being republished. But I will tell you that I believe that Rendlesham is an area of high strangeness. It's like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. You have Paul Sinclair at Bempton, such a wonderful guy. Really love the guy. He's really amazing researcher and a good friend. Yeah. When you look at these places, they seem to stimulate this, this level of high strangeness. And this is something that I've also been looking into, why it is that, when there's a UFO experience in certain geographical locations, more times than not in hotspots around the world, why people are seeing things like, the black cat or the werewolves or, these lights or whatever. Yeah. So I believe that, when you'll start to research the UFO phenomena, you begin to find that you're going down the rabbit hole, literally. I mean, we had an experience back there, me, my brother, and Susan, back on the 8th of June, 1998. And we've been researching the area for about 10 years. And I believe that we had summoned a UFO, and that all actually happened at the forest in Rendlesham, in the field of Capel Green at 10:15 p.m. at night. And that was an incredible experience. And people said, did you take footage? Did you take cameras? No, we didn't. And anyway, even if I had, who's going to believe you? And I'll just give an example here. The last UFOs that my brother and I had seen, along with other witnesses, on the 9th of April 2016 at 11:15 p.m. at night here in Kempston where we live. That was incredible. 3 huge, massive, circular white UFOs hovering over our house when I was driving back from some friends after a small celebratory dinner. And my niece was involved in that. But, she filmed them as they were coming on their way. And when they arrived here, they were stationary over our house, very low. Do you know there was no one walking their dog? There was no one in their cart. There was no one, no one. And this is why, when, people say, oh, is it because you're a twin? No, it's not. Is it because you're special? No, we're all special. I don't care who you are. We're all unique. Yeah. But this is why I'm saying that people say, oh, did you take photographic? Well, yes, we did take film footage. And no one's disputed that because it's been analyzed. My niece took the film on her phone. She filmed them as they were on their way from Marston Mortain to Kempston that night. So the Rendlesham case is very fascinating, and people tend to think, oh, it's just about the 1980 event with the American troops based at Bentwaters, Woodbridge. No, there have been UFO encounters there many years before and many years afterwards, but everyone just stamps it as saying this is the main event that occurred. So we're discovering that, through the research that we're doing, that it's not just about UFOs. The UFOs bring in levels of high strangeness and seem to warp both space and time, and there may be a residue that's opened up when they enter into our dimensional airspace, whichever way you want to look at it, that allows these other dimensions of reality to seep in. We just don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, because I've subscribed to something very similar in my own, my own way of thinking, because I've spoken to Paul Sinclair. I've been lucky to interview Paul. I've spoken to Phillip Mantle. We've discussed various different areas of the country where there seems to be, as you quite rightly said, not only UFOs but also paranormal activity, cryptozoology sightings, for instance, Paul up on the northeast coast, and so on. So it's almost as if that there isn't a one size fits all when it comes to these areas of high strangeness. You get all sorts of different types of phenomena going on in the same area, and what you just said about opening dimensions, or opening, let's say you can describe them as a portal into another dimension, I think is a really interesting one. I noticed on your CV that you won the British Mediumship Award in 2008 in Portsmouth. Although you did say that you don't want to become known as a medium, which is understandable. But I'm just interested really on what you think about this ability to communicate across different dimensions. The obviously the human brain is an amazing piece of biological is equipment the right word? I don't know. But you talk about being able to communicate with loved ones who've passed on to who've passed on and things like that. So I'm quite interested on your thoughts about that.
Well, I really didn't have any interest in the afterlife until my maternal grandmother passed away in the same month and same year as Princess Diana. But a strange occurrence happened with my brother and myself and our grandmother out in their back garden in Middlesex. back in the early 1980s, and it was to do with this silver orb that came over in broad daylight over her head. That's been documented, and she told us that the fairies had come to take a closer look at us. Now, our grandmother was psychic, so when she passed over to the other side, just before that, she was in a Somerset hospital. She was suffering from cancer, and we'd gone to see her the week before, and I woke up in the early hours of the morning. I think it was about 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock. I can't remember if it's 1 or 3. And I started to cry, and I knew she'd gone. And then her voice came in my head and said, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" A little bit angry. She was never angry with me and my brother. And then the phone rang 10 minutes later, she passed. So I went to go and see a medium that used to work for the FBI in America. She used to work on cold soul cases, and she wiped the floor with me, Craig. I mean, she said, "You come here to test me." And she said, "Did you know that you're a medium and that you'll end up doing this work?" And I thought, oh no, oh please no, not someone that's dealing with UFOs and now talks to the dead. My reputation will go down the pan. Well, a sense of irony there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when she said, "I'll be back in 2 years," and 2 years later, I was back because 3 more people had passed over. And I'd seen a friend who had passed over, who had died of cancer. He was 20. And that was all due to a fact that I picked up a book in an old secondhand bookshop called Reunions by Dr. Raymond Moody. And he said about, using mirrors to contact the dead. And I tried it. Nothing happened until I came back from work. And why does it always happen in wintertime? In 1999, and my friend appeared through the conservatory glass doors where I am now and appeared to me after I requested. I said to him before he died, "Could you do something and show me that there's life after death?" I thought he'd punch me, but he did it. So then I wanted to explore consciousness and whether or not there was any truth in the claims of being able, people being able to communicate with those who've crossed over. And then I found that I started to become, people call it psychic, I suppose. And then this led into the area of me really investigating, I think for about 15 years, really meditating, going to circle, joining people. And you could see people that professed everything and they weren't. And then I met some people who were on the ball, let me tell you. So I wanted to then find my grandmother, and, I think there was a piece of me and in my soul that thought, well, we live and we die. What point is there to our existence? I wanted to give up. I didn't want to carry on anymore. The world was so against anything that promoted levels of high strangeness. And we're now beginning to find, thank God, that even with UFOs, people are saying, oh, yes, they're true because the Navy have admitted it. Well, my goodness me, what have we been saying all these years? So I wanted to discover whether or not I was lying or the system we served was lying. And it was a very passionate, very personal voyage. And I didn't want to do clairvoyance, but then I found myself being asked to go to church services, the spiritual churches. And I was booked up to the eyeballs, and I've been doing it ever since. And when I do it, I just ask for a yes or a no to confirm or deny what's coming through. I don't feed. Now, what's interesting about the brain is that this clarified something for me, and something that the medium, the brilliant, she was only young lass when she was doing the readings. She said that you'll bridge the gap between the psychic and UFO phenomena. I didn't know what she was talking about. And but one of the things I discovered is that if you look at the human brain, from birth, we are programmed by the system to believe what is right, what is wrong. Okay, we have our own way of dealing with reality, as we call it. But the brain, I would give an example like a mobile phone network system. Let's give a very simple analogy here. You have different models of mobile phones. You've got the iPhone and the Nokia and all the rest of it. And although they're all different from one another, the signals are exactly the same, but the signals are carrying different information. So you and I and everyone else on this planet is a soul, is a conduit to whatever. I'm not going to go to superstring theory here, but that's really amazing. But we are containers for consciousness. We're recording our experiences. And I kept thinking, well, why are we recording these experiences if we're just to die and then all our experiences are nullified? So I knew then that those on the other side are able to connect with all of us at some level, when most of the time when we're disabled in the sleep mode, for those who don't believe, because consciousness is disabled, or I had a dream about my mother or my father and it was so real. So when we look at it, my understanding is that, it's not a big, subject, the taboo subject. It is real. And I think the system that we served has tried its damnedest to narrow our field of conscious awareness. We have to be careful because you get some people that profess absolutely everything, and their mind is open to all sorts of stuff. If you, walk that very careful line towards the truth, there's a lot more to us than mere life and death. And certainly there are other levels of reality, maybe multiple levels of reality that we're just beginning to explore and kind of accept, because it's ignorance, unfortunately, which has closed consciousness, which has narrowed that field of awareness within all of us. But I want more. I want more. So I was put forward to attend this huge contest that was held, oh God, how many years ago? Was it 2008? I think it was. And I was petrified. And of course, you had these panel of judges. Tony Stockwell, the TV psychic medium, was there, and many others, and the SNU, Spiritual National Union, that I don't have any affiliation with. I was literally petrified. And what they do is they bring all these people in that they chose, and we were not to know anything about them. There was about 40 of us. And then we had to read and bring evidence through, and they'd tick you on what you did, what you brought through, and all the rest of it. And I won it. But I didn't want to pursue it because they wanted me to act like a clown on a stage. I'm sorry, I've got to say that.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to work that way. I deal with facts where they're applicable, where they are meant to apply. So I still do my clairvoyance, but there again, you see, all of us are psychic. It's just that, people think, oh, you're special, you do this. No, we're all special. Yeah. We're all unique.
Yeah, it's. I often use the analogy of tuning in an old radio and tuning into certain frequencies. Some people are more attuned to certain frequencies than others. Do you believe then that we are being controlled by a consciousness from another reality, from another dimension? Do you think that all this links in with what you were talking about earlier with UAPs and the greys and the reptilians?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Craig. Very good question, and one that has given me a lot of reason to think about and speculate. Although, again, we have no proof. Or my brother and I always joke and say, "What do we have after all these years of research? We still have a blank page." But hey, we can try and put some formula and theories down on there. It doesn't mean to say that we're right. We may be very wrong, but I don't think every researcher is wrong. And I have high regard and high respect for all of those researchers, friends, and the colleagues out there, even in the United States and in England. Now, what's interesting is that, is there a force that's stopping us from exploring more about ourselves? Yes, I believe that. I believe the system that we work is corrupt, that we work for is corrupt. Sorry, I believe it's completely corrupt. There is an agenda without being a conspiracy theorist, because everything that's a conspiracy, it turns out to be a reality at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think there's a systematic agenda to deliberately hamper any effort into exploring these other areas. The media is one of them, because they will downplay everything, and they'll make. And I've been a victim of that on more than one occasion on national television many years ago, being so naive and open and honest, and then finding yourself being a circus act for television studios. So I believe that this goes higher. People say, oh no, it's just a conspiracy. Well, no, it's not actually. If you look at the systematic control, David Icke, another brilliant man, a wonderful guy, he's been writing about this for many years. And it's funny, isn't it? Because these people, I'll give an example here, if I may, Craig. These people in power, these people in control, most notably here in the United Kingdom, we have a parliament and we have MPs and a prime minister that is supposed to be there for the people.
Yeah.
So Nigel Ross, a good mate of mine, Nigel Ross, created NUFORCE, which is the National UFO Reporting Service. And Nigel and I, funnily enough, I do apologize, he's just contacted me on Facebook. I'm sorry if there was a ping there, but I'll talk to him later. But we wanted to get Parliament involved in this disclosure long before this report came out. So I wrote to a well-known parliamentary figure who had been connected with another UFO event many years ago with Gary McKinnon. And I wrote to this lady, and, we put together this dossier and saying, we'd like, members of your parliament to meet with us to talk about this problem, because there is a problem, and let's lay everything on the table. Let's bring researchers in. Let's work honestly and openly. Let's try and find out what we're dealing with. And we got silence back, absolute silence. So.
Sorry to interrupt, Phil, but do you think that's because there is an agenda to keep it quiet, or
yes,
because we're not ready for the truth?
But that is, I agree with what you're saying, but, we are ready for the truth. I'm not being funny or anything. I don't understand. And this is why I think that when we're dealing with UFO, UAP phenomena, there may be some elements to it that the system that controls us may find very uncomfortable to address. And something certainly that a lot of researchers have been discovering about the phenomena itself. It's not just about the viewing and sighting of a UFO or what may be behind it, but the intentions behind these objects. Now, you have a difference within the UFO community. Most people believe it's all love and light, and some people believe that we're dealing with demonic entities. But I think and feel that the intelligence behind certainly the famous ones, the Greys, have their own agenda.
Yeah.
And like we as a human species have our own agenda. We don't see any wrong in that. And maybe they may not see any wrong in that. And of course, I've got to say this, and people will say, oh, no, how dare you? But people only want half truths or lies. We are not a nice species. I'm not talking about every single person, but we're a very destructive species. We're not to be trusted. And I think and feel that, because this programming from the system has been going on for, millennia, it's going to be hard for them to turn around and say, oh, by the way, yes, UFOs are real. But now the big problem is people are going to start asking questions. What are they? Where do they come from? What are they like? What are their intentions? Yeah. So it's going to open up a real can of worms there where that's concerned. So it's not just about disclosure or tell us they're real. Please tell us. We know that.
Yeah.
It's what's the rest of it that's going to be a problem.
So what's holding back disclosure then, do you think, Philip? What's the reason? Because for the last few years, there seems to be this sort of bubbling under of, people in the field, various other people in the field saying that disclosure's coming, this sort of drip feeding little bits here and there. The Tic Tac UFOs, for instance, seems to have been sort of drip fed into the consciousness of the world, if you like. Why do you think we've not had full disclosure then?
Well, I think the truth will astound us. And I think that the system that we serve, the corrupt system that we serve, is now finding it's got a problem because people are starting to ask questions. They don't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the problem. I think there's going to be a lot of frightened people out there. Granted, there will be, God love them. People who just want to, you've got to love people because they just want a simple life. They want to cuddle up with their family, watch TV or whatever. Yeah. But for us ardent researchers, that's something that we will be able to deal with. But will the public at large? If you look at very simple examples, which you know about anyway, you just mentioned a fuel crisis or water shortage or anything like that. And, it's like watching something from a Sir David Attenborough production, where, the creatures go ape. Yeah. So I think, to be honest with you, this is the system that we serve, I think, is very much aware of what's going on. I know people say they have secret departments, but come on, most of those people in either Senate or the Pentagon or CIA, FBI, whatever, even in Parliament, some of them are going to be interested in UFOs, and they've probably been sniffing around and asking questions. But I believe that the real reason is because of fear. And I believe that, this impression of them all coming in motherships around the world, and, coming down love and light, peace and all that, will tear them to pieces, will rip them apart. And I think that the phenomena is so incredibly fantastic that it's going to take people, it's going to frighten them to know how they are actually getting here. Yeah. Whether or not, people, I'm not going to get into the argument of time travel or, interdimensional hypothesis, or whether or not they're coming from another star system and found some way to us, or maybe they're very close to us already. Yeah. I don't doubt that. But this is the problem that we have.
Yeah, there's a lot of public apathy, isn't there? I think you're right in what you said there about people just wanting a simple life.
Yes.
And I mean, we know that. I mean, at the moment, I don't tend to get into political discussions. Certainly not on the podcast, because that's not what I'm about. But I am a keen political viewer, if you like. I like to watch what goes on with politics, and I've got very strong political views. And the vast majority of people do seem quite apathetic. It's interesting what you mentioned. You mentioned David Icke.
Yes.
And when you were talking at the beginning of our chat about the reptilians, the first person that popped into my head was David Icke.
Yes, bless him.
Yeah, and I was wondering, if you feel that because he has been open to ridicule, hasn't he, from many quarters. Although he's got a lot of people who believe what he says. He's got a lot of followers, as it were, a lot of people who are singing from the same hymn sheet as him, to coin a phrase. He does tend to be ridiculed in the press. And I'm wondering whether you think that might be a factor, especially with regards to the reptilian angle, because he says things along the lines of, the royal family are reptilians. Well, I don't know whether they are or they're not, because I don't have the evidence to prove one way or the other. And that's the way that I tend to work with everything that people tell me. Unless I have strong evidence one way or the other, I can't form an opinion. But he does seem to have been ridiculed.
Yes. Now, I can't, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Now, I can't, and I won't say anything against the royal family for personal reasons, but I will say to you that I believe that it's quite obvious, isn't it? What they've done to that man, that brilliant man, and, he believes he's right, and a lot of what he writes about makes absolute sense. I read all of his books, and he sent us a copy of his book, me and my brother, one of his copies of his books, which was very kind of him. He makes a lot of sense. Now, this is the thing, conspiracy, isn't it? I mean, the system needs a conspiracy in order to hide its own conspiracy. Yeah. And it revels in conspiracy. It needs a conspiracy to survive, to hide. Now, in terms of David Icke, when I think it was very strong when they started to remove his books from the bookshop, banned him from the YouTube channels. What does that tell you? I mean, I'm not going to say anything that I shouldn't say here at all, but I'm just going to say that a lot of the things that the media outlets do is that they will literally, start to hamper onto someone and, bring them down and make them an example of, like, you bad person, how dare you say this? You're not allowed to say this. You have to follow the official narrative. If you follow the initial narrative, then you'll have your dames or knighthoods or whatever, if you've got plenty of money and you fit into that level of society. This is why I feel that there was something incredibly wrong. Alex Jones was another one in the United States of America who had his own views and opinions, whether right or wrong, but he has been shut down as well. And when you see this systematic shutdown of people's voices, alarm bells start to ring. Now, in V, Kenneth Johnson's amazing 10-hour miniseries V back in the 1980s. I mean, I love the 10-hour,
I remember it very well.
Yeah. Ronnie, my brother was he's been in touch loosely with Kenneth Johnson, and he'll tell you all about it. Kenneth Johnson's allowed him to use his bits from V. But if you look at Kenneth Johnson and V, you just watch V, and it just tells you everything that you need to know about how a system can kind of like turn the tables on the people, and this systematic level of control and also conspiracy. There was one line where the scientists were saying in V, the beginning part of the film, where they were being set up, and one of them says, "It's a lie, I tell you, it's a lie." But of course, the media were like, with Mike Donovan as well. Mark Hamill played the the intrepid Mike Donovan, and of course there was a scene on there where he'd been on board the ship, and he got that camera footage of the reptilian, these beings being reptilians, and then of course he was all, and then they cut the transmissions, and then all of a sudden they were after him, and the media then was like bringing him down. So I always say to people, look and see behind what's being said. I think David Icke also said, when the system is trying to put all of this in front of your face, look and see what's not being talked about. So I believe that, he talking about these darker forces, which he does, it is a possibility. We have to be open to this fact. We can't deny it because we don't know. Certainly a lot of people who end up getting these very high positions seem to turn, they change. It's like either the puppet masters above them are starting to control their strings and tell them, you'll say this, you'll do that. Otherwise you're out, and you're going to be out anyway because your job is only temporary. So I do believe that our system is controlled by a hierarchy of unseen, nameless, faceless bureaucrats behind the scenes. This is what I argued in my book, You, the Public Deceive, the Grand UFO Deception, at the end, that Philip Mantle brought out through his Flying Disc Press. I was very honored that he wanted to bring that one out. And this is the thing we're finding. But then again, you see within the UFO Department of Investigations, you'll have researchers at loggerheads with other researchers falling out with other researchers because they don't believe or acknowledge what they're doing. And this is sad because, I think that none of us know what we're dealing with, but I think that we can see that there is some kind of pattern to this. And certainly in terms of that document, that pathetic 8-page document that was released about, the Pentagon and the investigation also into the UAP phenomena. And it said nothing. It said hardly anything at all. I mean, it's like...
There was a lot was redacted, wasn't it, as well?
Yes, that's right. So who knows who and who knows what? It's clear. It's quite transparent to know that the system, or some aspects of the system, know exactly what's going on, and they're watching researchers. It's no conspiracy. They're watching what we're doing, what we know, who we're connected with, and they probably accumulate a lot of the research material that all of them have been, digging into to try and put the pieces for themselves together secretly.
Yeah. So I suppose most people would agree that above a level above our government is the media moguls, shall we say, who a lot of them who run newspapers and so on, and news outlets are often talked about as being the ones that are pulling the strings with our government, certainly, and I would imagine with governments all over the world. But what you're saying is that there's other levels above that, which which are hidden, we don't know about, and they are a lot more dark and disturbing, really, than we could ever imagine.
Yes, if you put something into fiction, however, if you're successful in like whatever avenue of the arts that you want to explore, whether it be film, music, or, in terms of books, if you fictionalize something, they love it. They'll promote it. They'll do what they can to be behind it. Philip Pullman's The Dark Trilogy, The Dark Materials, all these different things. Oh, it's wonderful because it lies in the annuals of fiction. Now, if that came out as fact, that would be a very different story, excuse the pun, altogether. You see how the system, it's like a lot of these, and they can't help it, God love them, a lot of the celebrities are good people, and they get, sucked into this whole power game, and the masters at the top, even in the music industry, end up controlling them and in some cases destroying them. So I think there's a hierarchy of control that literally wants the Joe public to see what it wants you to see, to believe what it wants you to believe, and anything that outside of that box has to be squashed and destroyed. So and this is the really horrible really nasty part to it is this word conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's because, and everyone that, God love them, the people that don't fully understand what's going on, yes, they said he's a conspiracy theorist, therefore he's mad, he's a nut, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he just follows the official narrative. But when you're actually in that situation, it's a very different game altogether. So it's very frustrating for a lot of researchers, trying to get a move towards disclosure. When you've had UFO sightings like the last ones that we had on the 9th of April 2016 at 11:15 p.m. at night, they were hanging right over us. They were there, and that the technology and the movements they displayed was not from this world. And it's so frustrating for you to try to plead your case, to say, I'm being, open with you, I'm very honest, this is what happened. But again, people don't want to know. And sometimes it feels like you're going mad, like, this is the thing, things start working in your head, thinking, well, what the hell is going on? So
start doubting yourself
in terms of the sighting, no, but in terms of the way that it's all the system works and the way that ufology is going, yes, sometimes that happens quite a lot.
So have you got any research that you're doing at the minute, any upcoming books that you're planning? Because I mean, you've got a really impressive library of work that you've already written. I assume that you've got other works in the pipeline. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I am working on a thesis for another author abroad for his book. I'm working on some more articles, and I have 2 other books in the works. One of them is called Visitors from the Void. That is my book, and it's going to be dealing with the Greys on a much deeper level of investigations. That I'm really excited about that project, Visitors from the Void. So hopefully I want to try and get that completed by the end of this year, almost certainly into the next year. And I'm also working on another project with another author that I'm working on another book at the moment with dealing with that. But certainly, it's not the end. I want to work on another book about consciousness, about psychic exploration, taking the mythos away from it, the oohs and the ahs and all that rubbish, getting down to the nitty gritty bare bones of what's going on an empirical level of awareness, conscious awareness. So yeah, I'm although it sounds like really glamorous, I can tell you, Craig, it's a lot of hard work.
I know.
It really is a lot of hard work. And it's like sometimes you think, oh, God, I've got to get this done and I've got to get that done. But it's really, I enjoy it. And, I enjoy the company of my esteemed colleagues and friends who are connected within ufology. There is no ego to be had. I have no ego to bruise. I'm not, one of these star-studded individuals. I would rather research and remain in the background than be out there in the limelight. That's the way I've always been. I love writing and I love bringing new ideas to the table. But certainly, as I said, it's incredible and it's really fascinating, and the phenomena is real, and it exists. It is there. And there's going to be a massive paradigm shift in terms of our consciousness when this starts to blow out. I think that's going to be a real amazing thing to happen. So this light and this darkness is battling itself out. And I think the system of old is beginning to collapse. And I think people are beginning to wake up and think, hang on just a minute. I'm living my life. I'm doing a job I don't really want to do. I've got to pay astronomical bills. I feel brain dead. Why can't we live in a system whereby the system says, if you want, well, let me explore this area. Maybe I can contribute towards this. Yeah, come along. We'll help you. And I think things in the future is going to change. I hope for our children and for their children in our future. And I hope it doesn't end in a bad way.
No, I do agree that there needs to be a massive rethink of society and the way that we, I mean, you were quite right in what you were saying about, our species is inherently destructive. And I think, I think the way that we the way that we treat each other, the way that we treat the planet.
Oh yes,
really needs to be reassessed, and very quickly. But then, of course, that would beg the question: well, are we being held back? Are these entities that you've been talking about, are they holding us back, or are they here to help us? I mean, I suppose that's an entirely different conversation for another time, but it's a fascinating one. Can I ask you about your media work, Philip, if you don't mind? Because again, you've got a very impressive list of media work that you've done over the years: TV programs, radio interviews, your own podcast, and so on.
Yeah, I've just done some film. Well, there've been a number of filming that my brother and I have done last year, and we've got some more filming to be done this year. And then I also, I've got some other things lined up, or some other production companies have got some things lined up. I can't say too much about them.
That's fine.
But that is really wonderful. And it's not that I've never sought adverse publicity. I just go along with whoever wants me wherever I can be of some use. But just going back very quickly, Craig, to your question, very interesting, because none of us know. We can only speculate, and it's good to have feedback from other researchers. But I believe that the systematic control, this level of corruption in our society, it's very much all based on money and control and mental manipulation. Yeah. And I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I've seen this. I think the ways of old are beginning to collapse. And I think people are beginning to wake up and think, hang on a minute, I've been had here. Yeah. But you see, the system is so frightened, it will use fear constantly. I mean, given an example, I'm allowed to say this: AOL, any media outlet, all that you see on there, all that they show is all about fear, negative, warning, disturbing footage, but they want you to watch it. Yeah. And this is the really annoying thing, that I think that most of that stuff on there is written by teenagers. No disrespect to them, but they're just following their orders from their masters. Yeah. So you can see how this is just one example of news media, of how it works, of how it sways opinion, how it controls consciousness. Yeah. And this is why I think it's going to be really amazing when we do get to that stage when it is admitted that, Houston, we have a problem, because I'm not talking about the UFOs being a problem, but we have a problem because we've been holding back on the reality of psychic phenomena and ufology. UFOs do exist, but now we've got to explain to the public what they are and where they come from, their intentions, their backgrounds, the rest of it. So I always joke and laugh and say, Craig, that, most researchers think they're going to be out of a job when disclosure comes. No, not so, because that's going to be an exciting time of more discovery. Yeah. If an intelligent species was to physically manifest and come into our level of reality and opened up, it would be so amazing, incredible to find out about everything about them. I'd be like a kid in a sweet shop. I wouldn't know where to start. Absolutely. I think I'd bore them.
No, I doubt that very much. But no, I agree. I think it will be amazing. Whether we'll get to see it in our lifetime is another.
Yes.
Isn't it? But no, just going back to media outlets, I think there is a morbid fascination for bad news.
And this is the thing with ufology as well. I think, a lot of people now are beginning to realize that there are things that are not right. And, but again, it's so you feel useless because you have no real money, you have no real power, you have no real clout. And the system that we serve has all of that power, all of that money, all of that clout. But let's not forget that these puppets within society, and that's all they are, puppets, rich puppets, they come and go. They won't last long, and eventually they'll spill the beans at some point, as a lot of them are doing at the moment. They're coming out the woodwork and starting to spill the beans. And so, in other areas of not only politics, but in the media world. So, it can carry on this farce of fake news and mental subjugation, fear control, because they want to disable human consciousness. And we hear again, just very briefly, about, people talking about this faked UFO invasion. Well, I know what they're doing, because, if there was to be some kind of invasion, let's just put it that way, if they want to call it an invasion, people say, oh, no, it's the holograms, the military using holograms, it's all fake. And you think, oh, my God, here we go. So this is why we're having a problem, because it's constantly muddied. We can't see any clarity within that muddy water. And I think it's really good that researchers are trying to clear that path and to look, on a clear reflection to see what really is going on. And I think most of us know what is happening. I think we personally, although you can't say anything, because even if you do have an opinion, which is very dangerous today, you'll be attacked. So going back to what you said, Craig, I very seldom make any political links or bringing forward my ideas about it, because you will be attacked, even by people down on this level of society that will attack you. So,
so be very careful what you say, in other words.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We wave and smile, and then you collect your Oscar afterwards. Not me. I can wave and I can smile, but I won't be collecting any Oscar. I'm more interested in the fascinating theoretical aspects of all of this and trying to put the pieces together, and also dealing with amazing folk, researchers alike the world over, which is really incredible. And having a sense of humor and having a laugh about it. I think that's the main thing. Otherwise, you'll end up, becoming a little bit,
Well, you could become very, very frightened of everything, really, I suppose, couldn't you? If you didn't look at things through slightly rose-tinted glasses. I mean, we can all hope that whatever is coming down the line is going to be positive for us. As opposed to the way that Hollywood tends to portray these sort of things, where the alien invasion is here to steal our seawater or to eat us or something along those lines. So you've got to stay positive, haven't you? Where can people get in contact with you and find your work, Philip?
Well, I'm on Facebook, as I think nearly everyone on this planet is. I'm also my brother and I have a website, which is www.thekinsellatwins.com. They can have a look and see what's going on there. I'm very honored if they want to take a look at the website. And we also do a radio podcast, Twin Souls. And so online, just to click in the name, and hopefully I'll arise somewhere along there.
Well, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and it's been really interesting. You've spoken about stuff there that I've never considered, and that's great for me, because that's opening my eyes to to the possibilities of what's going on around us. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. And remember that, it is like going down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland. I mean, the more that you dig, the more you look at, the more questions there are. But I think it's important for anyone out there who's, researching, or, you don't have to do it on a major level. Everyone is important, even if you're doing it privately. Believe in your truths and believe in what feels right for you. Don't be swayed by someone else's opinion. You've got to, agree with what you think is going on, because there's someone out there knows what's going on. So there must be someone. And I just hope that someone or that group ends up, lifting the lid and helping all of us and lifting us up and saying, here we are, you researchers, whoever you are, this is what we've got, make of it what you will. And I think a lot of brilliant people in this world could, researchers, if we all put our minds together, think about what we could do, what we could come up with, what we could achieve. It would be incredible. But the system wants us divided. It wants us divided in terms of our thinking, but it wants us as a unit, as a one mind hive consciousness, because technology is removing empathy and wants us to think like the system. It doesn't want us to think for ourselves, and that is dangerous.
Yeah. Well, like I say, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Philip. Thank you. And you've certainly given me some food for thought.
Thank you very much indeed. And I really value your time, and thank you for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure's been all mine. Thank you. You can find details of this podcast, my book, and my upcoming projects at www.craigbryant.co.uk. The Paranormal Pendle podcast will return. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep watching the shadows.